All right, our meeting is now in order. So welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. This is a very informal public discussion, if you will, plus council discussion. We're here to really just talk about the grant that we were awarded. We are live, so we're streaming this at home too as well for those that are at home watching. And really for tonight, we're doing these meetings for the next 3 weeks. And what we're looking to hear and discuss are your ideas about the grants, any suggestions, not that we can make all changes, but it's good to hear from the community what they would like to see done, or maybe even down to materials, or, you know, if there's something within this that you would like to see different, we can certainly ask those questions and see what we can do. Same for our council members here tonight as well. As you can probably see, we are missing a few council members due to, I think, 2 vacations and something work related. So they'll catch back up to us next week. Again, we're doing this next Tuesday night as well. And then again, the following Tuesday night, in an attempt to really capture what our community wants and feels and believes and thinks around this grant. So with that said, I had planned to bring the layout, the drawings of the grant. When I unfolded them, they are not the grant itself. So I do have what we presented at council a couple of weeks ago. If anybody would like to see it, I have it right here, or I can email it, either way. But I want to just open it up truly for anybody here to kind of just really start talking about what they would like to see. The ask that I would say, though, from an audience standpoint, if you're going to speak, please go up to the microphone so the people at home can hear you. Outside of that, I'm here capturing notes. Hopefully by next week, I'll be able to kind of take some notes back to American Structure Point and have them join us hopefully next Tuesday night and provide us some more input and details. But really, this is just capturing notes, ideas, questions that I can answer. Some I may not be able to. Might have to make that a takeaway and come back to that. So I do know, Doug, you're here kind of representing the Ohio History Connection, which is good. That's in conjunction with our grant, right? Because we were awarded our portion for the streetscape, their portion for the monuments or historical markers, and updating those too as well. So that, from that standpoint, I'm glad that you're here, and I will open it up to whomever would like to address the group here, whomever would like to start. Doug, you are more than welcome to address the group if you would like. I'm not putting you on the spot, but I know Doug is actually, he's really pretty much spearheaded this project for a lot of the parties. Ripley, Ohio History Connection, he was involved with that. He helped us with Georgetown. So he's, in my opinion, a resident expert on some of this.
I've been working on this Appalachian Community Grant for, it's almost been 2 years. I spearheaded the Ripley project and then became involved in this one because of what I thought was a unique opportunity. So I'll just start with some prepared remarks. I'd be glad to take any questions. I've spent more time on this grant than any of you want to participate or catch up on, but I do have the history of it, and I think, so I'll go through my remarks first.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'm Douglas McDonald. I'm a resident of Brown County and the retired CEO of Cincinnati Museum Center, the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center, and the Alamo. Tonight, I sit here before you representing the Ohio History Connection, who's unable to attend tonight's meetings. Tonight, you're going to begin the final design phase of an exciting opportunity for your community. The Appalachian Community Grant Program has the potential to turn Georgetown into one of Ohio's premier historical destinations and catalyze a new economic future for our community. To achieve this, we must all rally around the centrality of U.S. Grant's Georgetown sites to achieve the goal of the grant's aspiration to be transformational. I will assert this evening that U.S. Grant is the most important and significant native of Ohio in the entire state's history. Yes, I know, we've got great people from Ohio, from the Buckeye State. Orville and Wilbur Wright, Thomas Edison, John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Harriet Beecher Stowe, LeBron James, Gloria Steinem, and Jesse Owens, and many others. However, to me, greatness is when a single person takes action that alters the course of history. We have seen instances where a few people have done that. Mahatma Gandhi, scientists like Maria Curie, civil rights icons like Rosa Parks. Today, I would like to frame the question paraphrased from W.E.B. Du Bois's question from his book, The Souls of Black Folk, when he asked, would America have been America without her Negro people? Today, I propose we measure greatness with Du Bois's measurement by asking, would America be America without Ulysses S. Grant? Consider the critical victories during the Civil War. His win at the Battle of Fort Donelson, Vicksburg, and the lifting of the Confederate seas on Chattanooga. These victories changed the course of the war. Apply the standard. Was Grant the single person who changed the course of history? It was Grant who changed the course of the war and ultimately led the Union to victory. Grant then became the Major General and overall commander, winning the war. How important was Grant's role? Abraham Lincoln's private document from August of 1864, written in fear of losing the re-election, underscores the importance of Grant's victories. Grant's military successes bolstered Lincoln's candidacy, ensured his re-election, and Grant's actions directly influenced the preservation of the Union and the future of this nation. Indeed, Grant's achievements are myriad and profound. He not only changed the course of our nation as a military strategist and leader, but advanced the cause of civil rights, the abolition of slavery, and forever changing the trajectory of our nation towards freedom and equality. This brings us to the importance of the U.S. Grant element within our broader initiative to revitalize Georgetown. This element's not just a component of our project, it is the cornerstone upon which this entire vision for transformation rests. The Village of Georgetown's proposal to reorganize its downtown county courthouse square is intrinsically linked to the revitalization of the U.S. Grant historic sites. These efforts combined have the potential to transform Georgetown into one of Ohio's premier historic destinations and to catalyze a new economic future for our community. Imagine the built environment of Georgetown and enhancing the visitor experience with a new visitor center for an expanded U.S. Grant historic site. This will create a transformative impact throughout the region. The project will elevate Georgetown from a hidden gem to a national destination, appealing to both history buffs and casual visitors alike. Few communities can boast being the hometown of a former president, especially one so consequential to our nation's history. By elevating the stature of these sites and transforming Georgetown's Courthouse Square, we can expect thousands of new visitors, resulting in a significant economic benefits for our village and its residents. For decades, the Ohio History Connection and local volunteers of the U.S. Grant Homestead Association have been dedicated to acquiring development. Project is our opportunity to finally realize. Following the enormously successful celebration of the bicentennial of Grant's birth, it is the perfect time to pursue this project, continuing the planning and implementation work necessary for authentic and quality redevelopments of these sites. The U.S. Grant element should not just be a part of our plan, it must be the heart of the vision for Georgetown. Its success is vital to achieving our overall goals of economic revitalization, cultural enrichment, and community transformation. As we approach the 250th anniversary of our nation, it is time for Ohio to step up and give proper recognition to the most important person ever born in our state. Ohio should create a significant center of study and education celebrating Ulysses S. Grant. Let Georgetown show the world that we are proud of Ulysses S. Grant and create a center celebrating all that he means to this nation. Let us be resolute in honoring his impact and let everyone know by our commitment that America would not be America if not for Ulysses S. Grant. Thank you.
Additional comments around the grant itself that you would like to bring to the table, or?
Well, I can give you some context because I think that you all weren't involved in the early development of the grant, perhaps and I might have been in some of those meetings and you weren't. So initially, the Grant Homestead Association had one planner, which was OHM. Okay, it was selected for them. And the village then had American Structure Point because you had a lot of work with them. But we realized, the state realized they really didn't want to have two planners working in one community, and one project was going to make for a better project. And even though they had assigned different planners. And so OHM came down and had a meeting here in Georgetown, kind of put together some concepts and ideas, and I was working with Ohio History Connection on a broader concept. And at that point, the state was encouraging Ohio History Connection to make a direct application themselves. Well, as was the reality of this grant from its very beginning, when the governor made the announcement, I think, of the grant in November of 22, every time you went to another meeting, you got a refinement of the rules. And whereas at the beginning, like, you almost thought you could spend this money on anything, every time you went to a meeting, the rules contracted what you could spend it on. It was less and less and less. I remember going to a meeting where I was told that you could use this money to revitalize historic buildings that were owned by private property owners, that you didn't even have to stop the improvements at the fronts of the building, which was kind of the normal standard for public money, is you stop at the facade and nothing goes behind the facade that's public money. You could even take that money and spend it all the way to the back wall, everything. And so I think all of us had lots of ideas on how we could revitalize downtowns with that. Then it came back and said, well, maybe not so much to do that. And then maybe even less than that. And in the end, they began to say, well, probably not going to be spending any money on anything except public improvements. And whereas when they talked about this grant, always with a public-private sector partnership, in the end, the state's determination was that the private sector partnership could be private nonprofits, not private individual property owners. And as I looked at all the awards that have been made, I can't find a single allocation of funding that went to any privately owned for-profit entity. Okay, so all of those things that were originally thought to be a part of basically, and this is not just the state changing the rules. What was happening was, this is all that public infrastructure money. It was all handed down as the Biden infrastructure plan. We'll probably hear a lot about between now and November. But that money, as it was put out, then it was reallocated to us from the state. And so the state put a set of rules on it. And then and they thought, well, we could use it for all these things. Well, then the feds kept interpreting the rules of the legislation. And those rules kept changing. And so it wasn't the agencies that were trying to actually administer the program were trying to be difficult and just change the rules to make us all stress. They were getting different interpretations from the federal government in terms of what the money could be spent for. And so they would give those to the state, and then the state would have to look and think, well, okay, I got this set of rules that the feds are now giving us, and I've got these set of rules, which is how the legislation's approved, because they couldn't. There were a certain number of rules imposed by the enabling legislation, and they'd follow those. And in the end, fewer and fewer things could come through it. And the only things that were safe for expenditure were really public sector infrastructure improvements. And because of the commitment to have public-private partnerships, then you could pull in some private nonprofits. And OHC, even though it feels like a state agency, it actually is not. OHC is a private nonprofit corporation, okay? And so one of the things that really helped the Georgetown application was not just the fact that, of course, I think Grant's one of the greatest guys in the world, let alone, I know the greatest in Ohio. You already heard that speech, right? But the other thing that this lended to the strength of your application was you actually had a private sector component, which was OHC, okay? And so that's why when you look at the entire grant application that came out of Ross County, and I've read the whole thing and all the applications, there were a lot of projects that did not get funded, okay? Some that did in their application. you will find that that the thread for the entire application that they submitted, though, was historic sites, was a heritage application, heritage history and culture. That was their theme. And the state has said you have to have a theme for how things go in. So how did the state sort out projects? When you look at what they actually did, they actually followed their guidelines, which we always criticize the government not doing. They actually did. They took themes. So Georgetown was fit perfectly into this theme of historic sites. And the centrality of OHC was with the World Heritage sites now being listed in last fall as well. That played into the equation for this application. So it benefited from all the World Heritage sites, OHC, it benefited from having the grant home in it, and a number of others. There are other portions of the Ross County grant that were to spend for trails and parks and things up in Loveland, flat out did not get funded, okay? Just the other thing to kind of understand in perspective in terms of how lucky we are in Brown County for the awards given in Brown County. There was $500 million to hand out. After the first round of grants, administrative agencies, everything, there's $420 million. There were over $2 billion in applications, okay? So 75% of the applications were denied. And you're in the 25% threshold. And it's pretty remarkable that, I'm thrilled that we got that for Georgetown. I think it really helps us do some really kind of powerful things here to how do we get getting downtowns and small villages vibrant, filling storefronts, actually, not worrying about what's, what the glass looks like. I worry about what's behind the glass, having operating businesses. That's our goal. So how do you make your village different? And I think this helps do it here. In Ripley, we worked off the waterfront. So we had the Ohio River, and that was the other application. And so we were able in Brown County to sit in two of the largest grant awards. This one was $254 million, and $154 million, and the one that Ripley's a part of was $152 million. That's $300 million of the whole $500 million, and $300 million of the $420 million that was left to be spent. And so, we got New Richmond got 13 million, and if you just look at kind of this region, New Richmond got 13 million, and Higginsport got 6.3. I mean, this part of the state we did really well. Now the question just is, how do we leverage that? Because as I've given suggestions in Ripley, there's things you can fund in the future and not fund. Okay, so what we're doing in Ripley is making sure we prioritize the things that there'll never be another funding mechanism to do that project, right? So, so there's funds you can chase to expand streetscaping. There's funds you can chase, you can go after to do trails. So in my mind, and what we're doing in Ripley, and this is kind of getting off track of the OHC aspect of my representing them tonight, but it's like doing the core things, okay, that can't be, that we'll never get somebody giving us as much money again, right? So do those core things that we can build on and leverage, because we can leverage those with $500,000 or $1 million grants that we can go and chase every other year in the state capital budget and do. You can build those out. You can find other ways to get that done. Make sure you get the core things done as you're planning, that you'll never get funded any other way, that change the community. So that kind of my context of having worked on this, for 2 years. I think that putting the visitor center where the ABC Tire is allows you to kind of anchor the square, allows you to have a central point. You don't have a historic site anywhere in the country that doesn't have a visitor center. If it's a significant historic site, it has a visitor center. We need a way to bring people together. The original thoughts OHC always had was to expand the tannery or do something down in that area. But as we were talking about this, and I said, I think I was one of the people, I think I actually suggested the ABC Tire Corner. I like those guys. I go there and have my tires fixed all the time. I'll miss not having them to fix my tractor tires. But it's if it worked for them, I felt like it worked for us. And they agreed to sell, so I think it works for them. Working for us means you want to take people when they attract them to come downtown, but if you built something like down the hill closer to the Grant House, you're not going to have the people who come here spend any time on the square. And the goal is, how do we revitalize the square? So you want all those visitors to have something that kind of come there and they're on the square. And that's what creates the kind of economic energy to revitalize the square. So that's why that part of the project, I think, is so important.
Fantastic. Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple things, and I don't know if you can answer this, Mr. McDonald, or not. On the print that I seen, and I know that this is kind of up in the air, everything right now. That's why we're talking about this. But like, when I think of historic, I think of old brick cobble. I don't think of a pastel cobblestone brick being historic. I think of more of a darker, richer red brick in an historic setting. When I looked at the set of plans, I seen it looked more like our streets were going to be a pastel, light colored brick. And I don't feel like that is very historic looking. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a lot of people would feel differently, but I would like to see that considered. Because again, like I said, when I go to some of these old towns like Maysville, for example, and I look at their brick, it's all darker. It's like a richer, redder looking brick, not necessarily a pastel color. So that was one question I had. Is that something that's obviously still in the works as far as a color sample, or?
The way the grant programs works is, so the other thing that happened in this grant was nobody had enough time to do any of it, right? It was drinking early because the rules kept changing. You had everything, and there was a drop dead date of on December 6th, your application's in. If you submit on December 6th, if it's not in on December 6th, on December 7th, you're out, you're getting nothing. And the state was ruthless, but it was in. Now we had to wait forever to get an answer. So you start backing that up from a design perspective, okay? Well, you can't finish the application if you start on December 1st, okay? I mean, you had several months of real design that had to go in there because the applications had to go in with complete construction budgets. So basically, these things had to be pretty much conceptualized by August, and we didn't really get to fit. The planners general conceptualized in August, and I think the planners finally got awarded like in May when the planners finally got released for sure. And I'm just pulling this, I think that's pretty close though. So the point is, so they had to put a lot of design concepts down to make pretty pictures that made a grant application compelling. And they used, American Structure Point used what's called a photorealistic kind of design software model that kind of makes everything a little shinier than it really ever would be. And I think they just like, okay, is the skill look pretty as they get their attention and does it enhance our chances to get funded? I don't think anybody at the state cares what that streetscape design looks like, okay? And I think, you want to do something that's attractive, you want to do something remarkable, you probably don't want to do it exactly like Maysville because you want it to look like something that kind of represents Georgetown. But I don't think color palettes or whatever, shiny, not shiny. If you want to do it in red, white, and blue, which I wouldn't recommend, but you can do it. The color choices are all up in the air. There's nothing that's tied down about those sorts of
How
things.
do we get to that point? Because I'd like to set in on those conversations, because I own a few properties there in the historic district, and that might be slightly insignificant, but at the same time, it's important to me that if we're talking historic, I just don't see the pastel color being historic. I just don't see that. Now, maybe it might look vibrant, but at the same time, like that is important that it represents a time of the past.
I think it's got to feel the right texture. And I think there's lots of ways to do that. And I don't like. I mean, I wouldn't go with the pastel color palette either. you don't, there's historic preservation design concept that's put in by the Department of Interior on historic preservation, which is when you add new structures and it's not historic, you want it to look different, okay? Now, you can still, so it's a variance. So you know what's real and what's not real. When I was at the Alamo, the number one question everybody asks is, what's real? They come on site, well, what's real? You know, what's, and some of it is, but but you can do that by merely having kind of a more contemporary size block that would not have been historically there. You could do that by having a sharper edged brick that's used, that's actually the colors I think that you're probably more comfortable with. There's lots of ways to do that. The other thing, historically, they didn't do these fancy little patterns because the brick streets were very utilitarian. So these design concepts are sort of in there, which I think are kind of intriguing. I just don't think, I think you could do them in lots of color palettes. That actually kind of breaks that up and kind of gets that point. So I think there's lots of flexibility about that stuff. I don't think that's what the state's looking at. The state is going to be looking at is achieving the full objective for the grant site, because I think that was, I have some inside information. That was very important to your getting awarded this grant.
Now, another question. So I guess we'll get closer to that point as we have more meetings, and there will be.
Just go back to the architect and say, you know, bring us some options. I've worked with a lot of designers in my career, and you don't want to. A good friend of mine who was a city councilman in San Antonio and also an architect, always said, you don't want to design from the dais. And he says that was hard for him to do because he was an architect, right? But don't design from the dais. But say to them, bring me some options in terms of what the colors can be, because then if they bring you some options, you'll say, I like that one, don't like that one. Maybe some things about this one. And then they can come, then they'll bring you a better result. So you don't need to prescribe to them, but say, hey, bring us some options for what the color palettes can be. And I think you'll get to a conclusion much faster and you'll be fine with it.
Okay, and then my next question, I know roughly I'm understanding there's about 6.2 mil that is for the way it was worded, I believe, was realignment of the square. And so I can't remember in the plans or not, but I would like to think that we're going to tear all the sidewalks out, not just the courthouse, so all this ties together, right? Because like on the commercial road, for example, we've got solid slab of concrete. On the side where I have my restaurant in the Republican headquarters, it's concrete, and then it's like a brick pattern that's real plain flat. And again, I don't feel like that represents the historic, you know. Yeah. So is that part of that, or are we just doing the streets and the?
I don't really know. I was involved in the grant aspect of the whole thing, and so that's where kind of working with OHC and on that part of it to kind of make sure that happened, and working with American Structure Point, because I kind of took the things that, look, how do we tie this all in? So I was focused on that piece. All I know is that there's plenty of flexibility around that. What there's not flexibility around is you're going to have to do the scope. When you read the application, okay, and the way the application narrative reads, you need to be able to say when you get done, we did what the application says. And it's not so specific. I mean, nobody submitted the state construction drawings.
Right.
Those pictures, you got it's a 9-page section, it's Brown County. So that 9-page section, you just want to be able to read that and say, we did what's in that narrative.
Right. And then I also understood that we couldn't do underground utilities, but when we come across now, I don't feel like the light poles are underground utilities. Because when I think I think that's just lighting for the public access. So would that be redone as part of that? And then
That'd be a structure point question.
then I don't know where we have to have this meeting, but there's a lot of questions, like even our sidewalks, for example, in front of our building. Now, they're beautiful, and I love them being as wide as they are. But truly, if they cut 2-3 foot off of my sidewalk, it would still not be too narrow. And we could achieve having better access through that passage. When there's cars parked on both sides, it's very crowded to get through there. And you know, like I'm guilty of driving a dually extended cab truck, so I take up a lot of room. Now, they weren't made, obviously, for big trucks back then. More like a Model T. You know what I mean? But if we could utilize some of that sidewalk, if those do change, then we can create, you know, that alignment that they speak about in that.
No, I would just say, write all these things down and kind of organize maybe your village administrator, he's new, he's willing to take on all kinds of challenges now, and everybody still loves him, right?
Well, I'm sorry to aim all these questions at you, but I know you've been leading it.
I know, you're talking about the things that the engineers do, and the American Construction Point, that's in their wheelhouse. I'm really good on design of historic sites and historic architecture. I know how construction projects work because I've done big construction projects, but on historic sites and historic buildings. And I'm representing OHC. All I'm saying to you is, I think the critical aspect of this, we really need to get that visitor center aspect done right, because that really kind of creates the whole focus for the downtown. That's how we generate the business activity we want to generate downtown. And I think there's a lot of flexibility around the rest of those designs.
Is there funding available after the case that this is built to have people in there manning that?
Yes, OHC is they're gonna put that in their next operating budget to do that. So we know that it's gonna be staffed and put together. I think that's partially what makes it really impactful for Georgetown, is you're actually gonna have a site that is staffed more fully and is gonna be able to receive visitors year round, and it's still gonna require the local organization to actually manage the tours and do that sort of thing, but it's gonna be a more vibrant.
Well, I was just curious because I know we struggle a lot with paying the cost for the labor for the village itself currently. I mean, from what I was hearing from Kelly Campbell the other day, we're at 55%. So I'm just curious about, who's paying for the.
So here's the concept.
And I'm sorry to put these questions.
No, that's okay.
I don't mean to be the hard question.
I probably know the answer to that one. So the concept for the visitor center, because as a part of the discussions that we walked that through, was that if you ran that through OHC, it takes longer to do than if you ran it through the village. And so it was really a build to suit and then a lease. So basically, while it's in the village portion of the project, it's actually a build to suit. So you're building it to the specifications of OHC to meet their needs as a visitor center. And the good news around that is when it's all funded and done and paid for, you're handing it off to OHC. And they're going to take it over, they're going to operate it, and they're going to pay all the expenses of it, they're going to pay all the utilities of it, and they're going to pay all the upkeep on it. So so as we're structuring the proposal, one of the other challenges in this is everything has to be done by 26, okay, on the federal money. So, and it has to be under contract by this fall. So those are two big challenges. So it was easier to actually run it that way administratively. Now the way it's run is basically Ross County is going to do it. Okay, so Ross County will administer that. And when you're all done, you'll just sign a lease over to OHC and you've got no long-term obligations. Because it didn't make any sense for Georgetown to have any incurring expenses as it relates to maintaining the visitor center for the grant site. So that was just a way to facilitate it through the process.
One other quick question, I'll leave you alone. OHC, is that a private-owned company organization, or is that a state, federal, county, local government, or is that private-owned?
Ohio Visitor Connection is a private 501c3 charity in the state of Ohio.
Okay.
And so, Mike, to answer a couple of your questions inside of those questions, you mentioned the pastel brick and not liking that. That, again, is just kind of what he said, a portrait to submit with the funding to make it look pretty. It doesn't mean those are the colors that we're going with. How do we get our suggestions in there or what we want. This is what's part of this, taking notes, writing the stuff down, and then communicating with American Structure Point. And then they're going to come back to us with final options at some point. They'll be a part of these meetings too as well to have takeaways. But that's the whole point of this, is just to get our ideas down, make sure we're sharing some of the things we want, and then they'll start coming back as we get closer to the final plans to make sure what they bring back is what we want. And those colors, that type of stuff will be included in that. So things are able to be changed.
And then also there's a discussion of losing parking spots that'll need to take place, because the way that was, and I know again, this was all done in a hurry to get the funding. I can respect that and appreciate that, but I just want to know when that meeting's going to be in the future, because I want to make certain that we're definitely not losing parking spots. We lack them with the lack of business we have. So we go and remove 16 parking spots from that square. That's going to be huge. Matter of fact, I've had a call from a couple business owners here recently in regards to a parking issue where there's a person that owns 7 vehicles with trailers on all around the square. And, you know, it's hard for elderly people to get into some of these places. And it affects several businesses here when them cars are parked in them spots. So again, I feel difficult, but there's a lot here I feel like that needs to be addressed to make sure that everybody's happy at the end of the day.
And to that point, I think part of this discussion needs to be thinking outside the box in order to probably pull off some of the streetscape and make it a more vibrant, or a place where people want to come and sit and hang out and just enjoy. We might have to lose some parking spots. But what American Structure Point has already said is that think outside the box. So for example, is there a street? And there is there a street that maybe could be a one-way street? And instead of having parallel parking, you're doing the angled parking and you're adding more spaces that way. So maybe it's on, where the new mural is, maybe a street like that where you can make it a one-way and you're able to add 20 spots and you're still right there on the square. You're providing close parking.
I understand that too, truthfully, but again, I've got a lot of older customers that come into the restaurant, for example, and they just can't walk that far too. So, I mean, for them to go from down here by Stedham's law office all the way up to my place, they would just never do it.
But you're
So
still
we would
gonna,
lose, just like, when I come back, and I'm not trying to beat on nobody about the ABC tire. I understand the reasoning why that's being done, because it just kind of flows. It makes perfect sense if you were going to do that. But truly, we'll probably lose at least 1 to 2 customers a day in the restaurant that would come to ABC and they would get their tires fixed, or they would get an oil change, and they would be waiting, and they would come over and have lunch. So, there's business that we're going to lose in the community in revenue to bring this in. Now, hopefully the offset is greater, but I'm just trying not to be tripping over the idea of, well, we struggled with parking and now we've got worse parking. And Stan, you and your wife come to the restaurant. I know you guys wouldn't want to walk, from Julie Stedham's office to the restaurant, So that's all I'm just trying to alleviate. Right. So.
Sir, I have your communication unit mic as well, so to give feedback to American Structure Point.
Right. And again, I apologize if I sound difficult. It's just, I live up there on that square and I see with business too, the challenges that we directly, you know what I mean? So.
Our goal, Ohio History Connection, what we really want to do is find a way we can build the site that actually revitalizes the square. Ohio History Connection has a lot of vested interest in historic spaces, not just in its own historic sites. Because as a part of the Ohio History Connection is the State Historic Preservation Office. And so they're very much into wanting to see historic buildings retained and protected and preserved. And know that the way that happens is creating economic vitality. I mean,
I wish they'd send me some money for my historic buildings.
well, you got to apply for it.
I have before, but good. That's good. It's good.
So,
So Doug, we want to give you a break and allow you to take your seat back. That way you're off the hot seat for a little while. Stan, I know you have your hand up. If you don't mind, can you come up to the podium? Or I don't think we can bring it.
Ned speaking for the Grand Association.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and talk.
Well, I just have about the parking. I really think that when you're talking about parking around the courthouse, you've got to involve the commissioners. They're going to have
Sidewalks.
a big say about the parking around the courthouse. I can say that. I'm concerned because when I was practicing, there were times I couldn't find a place. Fortunately, I was across the street and parked around the corner. But I think if you do lose parking spaces, that's going to be a problem for the commissioners.
And the commissioners, to Mike's point too as well, they're part of the plan where we have to consult with them on the sidewalks. They just did those sidewalks on the around the courthouse. So that's part of the plan too as well, is having a meeting with them to kind of discuss, what they would like to see there. So that's all part of it. You're right.
To echo a little bit of what Mike says, when you're thinking about restoration, historical restoration, I always think of Colonial Williamsburg. I mean, you can't do any better than Colonial Williamsburg, in my opinion. And the other observation I would make, I think there's pictures around, Ned would know, pictures of the square with buggies lined up all along in front of the courthouse. Now that's the historic picture of our square. The same the wide sidewalks, I don't know that the stone wall was around the courthouse, but all of that era is what we're talking about. Buggies, horse and buggies. I don't know about the one with the pigs going through town.
Yeah.
What the square looked like then, but those buggies had to be, that picture had to be taken about, 1875 or maybe a little later? There weren't any cars in that picture. So I think that all has to be taken into account. And I don't know that the planners have seen any of those type of pictures. And I think my personal observation is this is the kind of a project that a lot of money could be spent that wouldn't really improve what our goals are, that could be spent on something else. There's that tendency to me, and that's what I see here, that a lot of these things would not have to be done to bring our town to the definition that Doug is talking about. I want it too, but I don't want to dig up the good things that we have and put new shiny things in that aren't going to match up with what we're trying to sell.
Thank you. You guys are playing musical chairs.
Yeah. So I think I know most everybody here, but for the viewers, I'm Ned Lodwick, and I am president of the U.S. Grant Homestead Association now. So to just go back to what Stan was saying, those pictures of the buggies, they're pull-in parking. They're not parallel parked. They're all diagonal parked around the courthouse. And the stone wall around the courthouse, of course, this will be a decision for the commissioners. The stone wall was put in during the Depression by the youth administration that was being taught how to lay stone. Okay, so that's back in the 30s. Okay, so those are historic too. They weren't just, there. So the U.S. Grant Homestead Association kind of fits into several places. If we have suggestions for the grant sites, we're going to talk to OHC. Our voice is going to come through them, okay? And I talked to Erin today, who's our site manager, and she said they're working on a day to get down here, hopefully next week, so that we can all get together and talk. So our voices will go that way. If it involves the murals, it's our voice, because we paid for those, okay? And at some point, we're going to talk to the council about putting some kind of minimum 30-minute parking in front of the mural on Cherry Street, because the trailer and the truck and the police finally got that straightened out, was parked there for 5 weeks, and
Was it
people,
still, I thought it was still there.
no, it's gone.
Sorry.
And no, it's moved. But people would come, and it's amazing to me how far people come to see murals. Before Kevin was done with that first mural, had a lady pull up across the street, get out and start taking pictures. And he went over and talked to her, and he said, you know, where are you from and everything? And she said, oh, I'm from South Carolina. And said, oh, so you're up here visiting and came to, she said, no, I came here to see this mural. It had been on Facebook. She came to see it. Okay. And strangely enough, she saw it on Facebook. She's a friend with one of my veterinary classmates. And I had put it on Facebook, and she's a friend. And so she shipped it, but it came from South Carolina before it was done. So people do come and want to take pictures of them. But nonetheless, with the statue, if something's involved there, it's the village and us, okay? Because we kind of own it cooperatively. And if it has to do with the streetscape, we are individual people. We're not going to speak as a grant association for the streetscape. I have concerns about the parking, because I'm one of those guys that don't want to walk very far. And so I was at Donahue's the other day. Just a sidebar, I try to do everything I can do in Brown County. Okay, I grew up in Mount Orb, so I do some stuff in Mount Orb, but most of my purchases are here in Georgetown. And I do the same errands every week. Hardware store, post office, feed store, bank. Of course, always at the Old Timers Building in the cabin. Every week, same notes. I don't know why I bothered to write a note down, because it's the same ones. But when I have several times recently went to Donahue's and didn't have a place to park on the street. Okay, so I was there. I had concerns from the pictures. Okay, and I know those are just up in the air, and they have no necessity that any of that's going to look the same. But I was at Donahue's the other day, and I counted parking spots along Main Street. And of course, there's not many lines there, but there was 4 cars parked there, including mine. And it looked like maybe 3 more could park there. But I look across the street, and in front of the courthouse, there's 12 people parked diagonally. So you're losing almost half of the parking spots around there. So, and that's again for your meeting, you know, and I know that's not set in place. But I just wanted to say that the Grant Association, we had a long discussion last Wednesday, and we're all for what's going on. If there's something that we can help with, we're happy to come to meetings. If OHC can't get there, we won't speak for them, but we take notes. But, you know, we're hoping that, you know, Georgetown can use this money and make it the best possible. So that's about all I've got to say. Do you have questions for me?
The only thing I'd like to add to what you said is, if we do change Cherry into a one-way street, then we put all them cars right in front of that mural.
I perked my ears up when you said that.
But
And I'm like, you know.
that's another thought. I mean,
Another
before we
thought.
get there, it's,
But
so I don't know.
that was an example. Maybe that was a poor example. But
Well,
Right, I'm just saying.
that's the kind of things
That's
though,
what you,
we want to think outside the box.
everything you do, somebody's gonna have a question about.
Yeah.
You know, there's no deciding on that. But the Granite House brings people here, but so do the murals, so does the statue. You know, people come to see those things, so they need to be able to see them. Our wilderness mural there on Main Street, anytime we're gonna have an event, all I gotta do is walk in and say, we're having an event, and he goes, yeah, we'll move stuff, we'll have stuff over here so people can see it, you know? And like I said, we did the same thing with Grant Days this year, talked to the police and they got it moved. And, so, I'll just put this out there so you guys can start thinking about where it is. There is another mural coming to Georgetown. Another Grant mural. So it's in the planning stage right now. It's gonna show up, so it'll be something else for people to come and see. Okay, so we'll have, 3 murals now, and we'll have another Grant mural showing
What's
up.
your mural?
Well, some say 3, well, obviously-
I'm not worried about parking.
obviously we have, the OHC has a mural out towards Hamersville. You know, I didn't count that, I was counting his mural.
Mine's more historic, too.
I was counting my
No, I'm
mural.
just teasing.
So, okay, so like I said, if there's something we can come up with, but like I said, we're only truly involved in the murals and the statue. Okay? Uh-huh.
So I heard that there was some discussion, or just heard when talking to Michael, as he was just throwing out ideas to be thinking larger and outside the box. You know, he mentioned something about, is there an opportunity, again, this is just an idea, is there an opportunity, as we get this project rolling, to move the statue to where it's more visible? Or, if you put a welcome center in, does it make sense to have the statue close to the welcome center? What's your thoughts on that? Or just in general, moving it?
I like the location because it's right there at the courthouse. I mean, anything's possible. I don't know. I saw him put the statue in. I don't know if anybody else saw the statue go in, but it was very tenuous watching it, trying to put a $6,000 statue and put it on that. The other thing you have to consider is the base of the statue is 12 foot wide and 10 foot deep.
And you have also, and you have also no funding for the business owners in their buildings whatsoever that I've ran across that was obtainable. Now, I say that, but they say it's out there, but I have had no success, okay? And I have looked. So when you go and take that statue out there and you remove them trees, then you've got the beautiful wall on the side of that building that would have to have something.
Yep.
And if you don't have funding as a private individual,
But
then
that's something to
it makes it
consider, the
very
foundation.
complicated for the,
And I don't know what's under ABC concrete. I don't know what's under there. That building burned the same as the building where the statue is burned, but in the 19,
There were gas tanks.
yeah, I gotta think there were gas tanks in there because originally it was the night and day service station and the guy had a towing business. And so there's probably tanks in there still because when that was transferred over and out of the gas business, I'm guessing no tanks came out, because
They didn't have to remove
No.
them prior to 1984.
yeah.
And those
So-
were in there, but-
So they'd be in there, so you'd be doing the same type of foundation as they did for the statue here, because when they went to build the foundation, they had plans for an 8-foot base and 4 foot high. When they went to dig that, they talked to me and they said, "Do you know what we found?" And all of a sudden it kind of clicked. I said, "A bunch of burnt lumber and bricks." And they said, "Yeah, because the hotel that was there burned, and they probably just put everything in the basement, covered up with some dirt, and that's what they found. So they had to go 10 foot down to the clay floor to start their foundation. So they had to pyramid it up. And I'm guessing, I think I figured out at one time there's 56 tons of concrete and gravel for that base and the ton of statue. So it's an iceberg. It's an iceberg. So that would probably limit, what could go, but nothing's out of the question.
What about the trees? I mean, how would you spruce that up then? I'm just curious.
Well, I'm one of those guys that liked all 4 trees and thought they were just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there were people that thought they were infringing on each other's personal space, and so they took those out. I think they need to, the problem is you can't take a picture of it. It's very difficult to take a picture of the statue from an angle so that you really get what it is from the front. It's not as nice a picture as it is from an angle. So, I know they said, well, we're going to do something to fix it up, but I think it needs to be green space there. But they need some kind of trees there that, don't infringe on the other. And I'm no arborist, so I don't know what kind of trees that is, but something that's doesn't grow too tall and something that's narrow going up. But to block it, you got to block that space, or your pictures have, if you take it from one angle, you get cars. And if you take it from the other angle, you get that wall.
What's the likelihood of a mural on that wall?
Well, I'll tell you, not to cut you into that, but I have talked to that owner of that building, is why I'm going to cut in on you here. And I would say if there was funding available for that, they would be more than happy to put a mural on there. But they wouldn't have the public, they wouldn't fund it.
I don't paint murals either, but talking to Kevin, that wall, one of the walls in town that would be great for a mural is there by ABC Tire, a great big brick wall, but it's in such a condition that you'd have to repoint all those bricks. Well, you know how Kevin had, you have to repoint those. You have to have a relatively smooth surface before you can put a mural on. And the mortar on that wall is receded, or maybe never was all the way out, because it was an in-between wall, because there was another building there. The building that was there before that burned was the Opera House, and it would have come right up to that wall. So it would have been an interior wall, so they probably didn't dress it up when they were putting the bricks in. So, that'd be a wonderful place for a big mural right by the visitor center. Have a nice big mural there, but I don't know. It would take a lot of work to do it. They're looking for something kind of smooth the Wilderness mural was about as rough as Kevin could paint. And if you look at it closely, if you take pictures, you can kind of see there's 3D around the bricks, So
That one of mine was pretty rough too.
Yeah.
Of course, we had to do the whole wall.
Yeah, you have to repoint it all and get it all smooth before you can do anything. Yep.
Where again is your next mural for?
I was sworn to secrecy. It's not our association doing it. And I was sworn to secrecy to not talk about it till it gets started. So that will probably be pretty soon, because I know the drawings are being done. So that's why I threw it out there, so everybody can think about it till it starts. Where's that gonna be?
Am I
Do
ready?
we have a copy for a guideline for where the government is allowing to be, like the way money's being spent? Do we get a copy of that? I know.
There's a budget the final budget, right? We're still waiting on that to come from the state to be delivered to Ross County, that kind of itemizes where each allocation is. That has,
So Ross County has the contract. and they're ahead of Orange County on the process, so, because the award was sooner, was earlier. So, I think you're like $700,000 or $800,000 short of what so you got the budget and what the request was. And then there's a small, there's a difference between that and what the award was. You know, I think it's, and I have no idea, I don't think they're gonna get a clear idea in terms of, frankly, how the state reduced it. I don't know, because it's, in Ripley, we didn't get the full award. We got $750,000 less than what we had. But we actually had a $750,000 line item. And so when we didn't get the full award, we just looked at our budget and go, this adds up to $750,000. We got $750,000 less. Now, we've never gotten an official answer from the state yet, but it was pretty obvious what they didn't fund. It was all private building improvement projects we had in, is what they didn't fund.
All right. Well, I'd just like to see what their guidelines are, because we hear from people saying what the guidelines are, but there's never no definitive
In terms of guidelines,
as far as where the money can be spent.
the money is gonna have to be spent for the things that are in the project application, and you have that.
Okay.
And that's the 9-page document, that was submitted, and then, pardon?
I didn't get a copy of that yet. I didn't get a copy of the plan yet neither, but we're working on that, right?
I thought you did. I thought you said Tara sent you. What did you, okay.
She sent me the information on the meeting. The only thing I've got in the email is the information for the
I'll send it to you. Just-
property.
Anybody wants it, doesn't have it, I'll just send it to you. I've got it.
Okay.
What I did was I excerpted, the full thing is like 200 or 300 pages, and I just went through and cut the Brown County section out.
And that's what I would want.
So and that's 9. And so yeah, people are asking for the whole thing. They probably think, well, you know, it's this great big thing. I just cut out the Brown County section.
All right, we'll make sure you get that. I thought you already got that. Okay, I saw, thank you, Ned.
Okay.
Mr. Horn, come on up.
No, I never got a copy either. Sorry.
State your name.
Hello, my name is Michael Horn. The environmental question came up, and that was my early career. So the first thing is knowing that there might be underground storage tanks or geophysical problems. And what will happen is some environmental contractor will come out and they'll probably use a machine called a geoprobe, and they will take samples and they will look for the things that indicate abandoned storage tanks. So if the tanks were at the ABC Tire location, your sensitive receptors for a major underground spill would be basements in the area. And if there have been no complaints of petroleum odors in the basements, then there might not be a problem. But you probably will want to be careful separating the environmental cleanout money from the grant money. And you probably want to talk with the state agency for underground storage tanks and say, hey, we're putting in a construction, we have a concern, and get somebody to check and see if there's any issue that must be addressed or remediated. As far as subsurface conditions, when you have a civil engineer and you're putting the building in, they will probably do drillings and soundings to make sure that they have the correct base for a concrete pad or a basement for the building, so they'll find out any issue then. That's about it. I missed the first half, so I'm behind.
Well, good thing is we're streaming this on YouTube, so you can certainly go back and catch up on what we started here, so.
Just wanted to say the environmental stuff, even if it's there, it's not insurmountable.
Mhm.
The thing is that I don't know how Ohio works, but there was, funding from gasoline sales tax to cover spills that were, not fixable by a business or people that were unable to pay. So the thing is, you know, the things that they're going to be looking at is there a drinking water well affected? Towns on town water, that cuts out a big hassle right there. The next are basements. Are there vapors occurring in basements? And odds are, if you haven't found a problem yet, you don't have one. Because people would know.
That's right. Thank you. We appreciate that. Would anyone else like to address council or each other? Podium? Please do. Just make sure to state your name.
Okay. I'm Allison Durbett, and I wasn't planning on talking, but I thought, might as well. Everyone else did. In terms of this grant, I think it's really exciting. And I think sometimes in the minutia of picking colors or talking about potential lost wages or earnings or all of that, I think we should be really excited that we got the money. And I know I'm excited because as somebody who's lived here my entire life, and I love that it's historical and that we have all these options, that it's going to become a place that I can hang out and be with my family. So I think the alternative parking is a good idea because I think that any place that's empty enough for easy parking, it seems like somewhere that people don't want to go. So I know like we went down to Maysville last week and we had to go around the corner, but it felt like, oh, this is exciting. Like there are people here, there are things to do. And so having that extra space, maybe it's a parking lot. They have that parking down there by their murals, that it's become, one is going with the other. And I don't necessarily have an answer for that. But the other thing I think alternative parking, when you look at that is sometimes the square gets really just those 4 short streets. And I know that some of the village business owners that I've talked to or, citizens feel like we get kind of narrowed into that. And so my hope is when we get the visitor center or the welcome center, whatever it's going to be, that when it starts to expand down that hill past the thing, maybe we go towards the library, all of a sudden the village center can go past just that postage stamp and we can start looking at these additional streets. Because maybe if you start parking near the library, somebody is willing to walk 2 blocks. And I'm not saying necessarily, people who aren't able to, but maybe I want to explore if there are businesses and maybe we have businesses who are willing to say, hey, I'll go in there because people will walk right past my business to go to parking. And so, those are some nice things. And I think just when we put the money in to make it nice is to make it very walkable and user friendly. Because I think the aesthetics do matter because if it feels like a place that's clean and well kept, then you're going to want to go to St. Marie and you're going to want to go to Mike's restaurant and then you're going to pop over to Sarah's and you're going to go into Donahue's and then you're going to walk down to the hardware store and then you finish it up at the coffee loft, and so it's like you want to make it a destination where when people like Ned go through their list, he may be a different demographic than I am, but I also have a list where I want to go through those things every week and I want to have lunch and I want to have coffee and I want the girls and I to go shopping and my family to go out and lunch and Bink and I go on a date. So that was just it. It's not necessarily anything specific. It's just, I think those can be some exciting things. I do think a green space could be awesome. Maybe somewhere where you could set little bistro tables, down by Fountain Square, they have where people eat their lunch out there and maybe people who go to the coffee loft and get their lunch or your restaurant and get lunch, maybe they can have lunch outside, they can, on the weekends, they can get cookies from Sassy Sweets and their coffee and they can have their picnic right there next to the Grant statue. And I think those kind of things are really cool. So thank you.
Great feedback. Thank you.
I agree with that lady.
Better.
I was thinking she should make a run for council. She would be excellent up here.
He's a smart one.
All right. Anyone else? Any additional feedback from the table up here? Well,
I did have a question, just a question,
You're fine.
and I know, so we want to honor and appreciate the historical aspect of Grant, and we do appreciate that. I think there's some misconception out there, and I'd kind of like a little bit of feedback maybe from the OHC. And is this, some people think that this is going to be a Grant museum, but is this going to be this visitor center? Is it going to be only focused on Grant, or is it going to celebrate Georgetown? Okay. So nothing else about Georgetown will be in there.
Grant's period in Georgetown, his life in Georgetown. If you go to the Grant Homestead, there's a lot of Georgetown history that's there. But it's not going to be a general history museum about the general history of Georgetown. I think that's your question. I just want to be clear.
Well, my question is it a museum or is it a visitor center?
It's a visitor center.
Okay, so will there be other, we've got the Brown County Fair, we've got the Ohio Valley Antique Machinery Show. I mean, are other things going to be exhibited there? Because there are other things about Georgetown besides Grant that I think people want to celebrate. And so that's my question as we move forward into this, especially with the criteria from the application, is does this have to be exclusively Grant? Or can it, I mean, it's going to be a large portion of it, even if it's not exclusively about Grant. But can there be other pieces that are involved there?
Any historic site reinforces the history of other things and communities. And I don't think all that's determined, but it will be a U.S. Grant U.S. Grant Historic Site Visitor Center. Okay, that's the whole objective around the design, is that's what you can leverage. That's gonna kind of make the site pop, to bring people downtown. Does that mean that there will be Georgetown history, but it's probably like cross-promotional sorts of things, promoting other things that are going on, promoting the antique machinery show, things of that nature. I want to come see my crackers when they're out there, so I want to promote it.
Right.
I want to promote that antique machinery show, other things of that nature. But it's not a general history site.
So just like any other visitor center, you'll walk in and you'll have all of your grant things and where they are, but you'll also have, if I'm understanding correctly, you'll have where you can have like flyers for other events and things around town, and that's what you're saying, okay?
That would be probably the starting point for the tours and stuff at that point, right? So, yeah, that makes sense. I'm just.
They kind of suffer because you need to really have a site. You need a place that schools come. You can have a group of schools. They can sit down. You can have an orientation. You can show a film. You can get to the site. You can have some exhibits there. You can have some cases for some artifacts. If we're able to get climate control in the space, we'll be able to have some nice, unique artifacts. If the budget doesn't let us get climate control, that'll probably be more limited. I would hope it would be done professionally enough and be able to get climate control cases. So the OHC would be willing to let some of the things they have in Columbus come down here and be on exhibit in the space. So things of that nature. So.
Okay.
I know I've talked to some folks at the OHC and about the introductory movie. And the Grant comes here twice a year. A couple of years ago, he came 6 times in the year. He's the premier U.S. Grant reenactor in the country. He's the National Parks Grant. And I talked to them, is that who you're going to talk to about being in the movie? And they said probably, because they have used him also at the state fair. So, hopefully a nice short movie, kind of reminiscent of what is at the Underground Railroad Center. Okay, that introductory movie, which by the way had several Brown County characters in it. They played in it. And, but, yeah, like Douglas said, it's gonna be mostly tied around Grant. There's some other aspects of Grant's life that will probably be added in. We'll probably probably have a section there, maybe a small section, to talk about Thomas Hamer, who was our representative and fought in Mexico as a general, but wrote the application, the appointment for Grant on the last day he was in office, opened the letter and wrote the application. If not for Hamer, Grant wouldn't have been at West Point. All these other good things wouldn't have happened, all these. And we do have the bell that was in Hamer's church that rang at Hamer's funeral. That's in the U.S. Grant Homestead Association's hands. And so we may have the possibility of having something like that in there, just to bring Hamer out. We've got Hamer Road, we've got Hamersville, so Hamer's, a big part of things around here. And I have people say, why isn't there two M's in Hammer Road? Because it's not Hammer Road. But anyhow, so yeah, I mean, like Douglas said, some things will fringe out from where Grant was, maybe something about the mills down on the creek, and because he was hauling stuff there, there may be, some things that they can work in. OHC's pretty good about putting things together to make it interesting for people when they come. Okay, they kind of know the business, and we will have some input in it. Maybe some local things that they don't know about, but boy, they really surprise you when they start looking into a village and they find out some stuff I never heard of. But I think people will really like it when they get it put together, and it's all up in the air right now, just like all of them.
Right, yeah.
I've got another difficult question. So from what I've understood and thought about earlier, you'd mentioned, Mr. McDonald, that the money would come from a portion of what Georgetown got for the realignment rather, of the square to build the Welcome Center. And then we would basically, I think the term you used was lease. Is that?
There's 3 line items to the budget.
Okay.
There's a specific allocation for the visitor center, a specific allocation for the grant site, and a specific allocation for the streetscaping.
Okay, so is the money been given through the grant to Georgetown to pay for the site of the Welcome Center? And was it given to Georgetown? Is Georgetown using some of that money also allocated through the grant to build the structure for the Welcome Center?
So I'm going to speak personally on this. I'm not representing OHC, okay? If you read your MOU, the grant was given to Ross County, okay, to execute the project. It was not given to Georgetown. I mean, it sounds that way.
So is Ross County passing that on to Georgetown?
No, Ross County's going to sign contracts. They're going to, all the contracts will be done with Ross County. I don't think you'll have a dollar go through your treasury.
So why do we give it to the OHC then? Well, it was mentioned earlier that Georgetown would be donating or leasing that land. I don't know which it was. So I'm just confused on.
The exception to that's the land purchase. I don't know. But in the land purchase here, so the land purchase,
So will that?
and then the improvements that go on top of that.
So will we be paying through the general fund to buy that
No.
then, or will it be coming through the?
No.
See, it's kind of confusing, and I apologize.
I don't know how Ross County do it. I know that in Lawrence County, what we're doing there is that Lawrence County, each grant recipient is getting advanced 25% of the total award, the state's gonna advance to the county administrative grants, okay? So Ross County will get 25% of the total award given to them. And then in Ripley, we're making 2 property purchases. And then what we're doing in Ripley is we're actually working with the title company and the plan at this juncture is that Ross County will wire the money directly to the title company for the closing. And so the money will never go through the Ripley Treasury. Ripley will end up with the title of the property after the title companies close the transaction.
Ripley will end up with the title, is what you're saying. So is that the same way it will work over here for
I'm
Georgetown?
not managing your grant.
Okay.
So I don't know the answer to that. I'm telling you how I know how we're doing it in Ripley.
Right.
And I know what the mechanisms are, that the money's advanced to Ross County to begin to fund the projects.
I guess it's just, and I apologize to ask so many questions. I'm just confused because just like a minute ago, you made the statement that you didn't know how our grant was going to go, but prior to that, it was, well, it's not our grant, it's Ross County's grant. And I'm sorry to sound so complicated, but
Ross County.
so
It's one of the things that people,
then I heard,
the beneficiary is Georgetown. And so it's a grant to Georgetown in terms of the benefit of all the assets. But the fiduciary and the legal entity holding the funds and the legal entity who is responsible to make sure that the grant is executed in accordance with the application, to make sure that all of the federal requirements are complied with, to make sure that the prevailing wage components are all complied with. All of those requirements, Ross County gets 3% of the total grant award to Ross County to administer all of that on behalf of all of the other agreements. So you may have a subrecipient. I mean, you could tell them you just want to be distributing the money and then manage it yourself, but you're not going to get the administration money, and you're going to have a huge project to manage. And
but I'm not looking to get the money or nothing like that. I'm just wanting clarity.
So that's the clarity I can give you. I know that they're holding the grants, and they're responsible to make sure the grants are executed in accordance with the grant agreement that Ross County is signing with the state that has all of these other beneficiary communities as a part of it.
And I understood we would be the beneficiary of it, but truly, I mean, I guess we will be because it's in our community, but my point in what I was asking all this to get to was, is there anything in stone that states that can never be sold or removed, or say Ohio History Connection 20 years down the road says, you know what, we screwed up here and we really don't need a welcome center. So we're going to lighten our load on responsibilities and we're going to sell this now to tire discounters. Not that it's tire discounter you're going to sell to, but just use an example. Again, we're the beneficiaries. I'm understanding through conversation, but at the same time, I'm understanding through conversation that we're really not the beneficiaries, because it ultimately is going to end up in the hands of Ohio History Connection. Correct?
I think Ohio History Connection has a pretty long and pretty good record.
Well, I'm not questioning their integrity. I'm just
saying, I mean, you're speculating.
right. I'm just curious.
And
That's a lot of money.
Right, and when you speculate, anything's possible. I used to be at the Alamo, and they tell me there's ghosts at the Alamo. I said, well, I never saw them. And they said, well, can you prove there's not any? Proving something doesn't exist, that is kind of a hard definition set to have, right? So that's a speculation. Here's what we can rely on. I think we can rely on Ohio History Connection. It's a pretty old organization, and it has fundamentally been funded for over a century. And they have sustained and maintained properties in really kind of all kinds of economic climates, and they've kept them all intact. I think if there's anything to kind of be, that you can probably want to take a wager on it, I'd take a wager on it. It's going to be maintained just fine for as long as we live and as long as our grandchildren live.
I'm sure, because we give them all kinds of grant money, right? With taxes, that's how is all funded, right? I would say a lot of it.
They're substantially funded with taxes.
Right. Okay.
I don't think that was, I apologize. I don't think that was speculation. I think it was more clarity, right? You wanted to
Yeah, I
know
wasn't-
where the money was,
They're not
whose
gonna
hands.
sell it. I mean, you're saying,
Yeah.
are they gonna sell, put it in discount tire, store there because Ohio District Connection doesn't want it anymore? And I'm saying, I think that's speculation, and I think it's exceptionally unlikely.
I don't think they could.
No, I
Sell it, they're leasing, they're leasing.
And they're
Well, that's
really
what-
couldn't sell it, right?
But I understood it wasn't a lease, it wasn't really ours, it was turned over to them, is what I understood.
I think we own the property. They operate it to a lease, is my understanding.
What we talked about was doing something like a 99-year lease with options to renew.
Stan, did you have a question?
I have a question for Doug. Doug, you say there's, up there in Ross County signing contracts. Are these construction contracts or administrative contracts or what? Because I'm curious what they base the contract on if it's a construction contract without any plans.
They're signing a contract between Ross County and the state of Ohio to actually execute the grant in accordance with the applications that were submitted, and that they have to comply with all of the federal rules and state regulations incumbent on accepting the money and awarding it.
So the contract isn't really to construct the visitor center here in Georgetown.
No, then Ross County has an obligation to see that visitor center in Georgetown and the other improvements as a part of the grant site and the streetscaping in Georgetown, that all of that is accomplished by virtue of construction contracts that I think most likely they will enter into directly, but you could do that different ways. That's not an absolute. There's options on how that's done. I'm not a part of those conversations.
I think there was one more question. We're coming up on our time limit for tonight, if you guys wouldn't mind. Mr. Horn?
It might be a good idea to get some people with 3D printers and build a scale model of the area so that you can pick up the buildings, move them around, look at it, and discuss options, because it seems to me that we're in a lot of theory land. And, for the civil engineers to have a plan, they're going to have concrete. X, Y, and Z is going to happen, and that's already decided, rather than paying the civil engineers to come up with 3 or 4 plans. But, the thing is there are just so many questions that we're spinning our wheels thinking about what is this and what is that, because we're moving too many variables at one time.
I would say, and I appreciate your feedback, I would say that we're really just trying to share our knowledge and our ideas and what we think for this project. And that truly is the goal, to be heard, to have our input in this project as a whole, not just us council, but we've got Ohio History Connection here, the Grant Association, people that just live in the community. And so I think the true point of this whole exercise as we move forward is to really collect thoughts from you guys and us, what we really would like to see in this. And then summarizing that and taking those thoughts to American Structure Point, who we're already contracted with to work with us on this project. And then it is on them to give us options, not just one option, but give us options, ideas, bring things back to us. And it probably will take a matter of a few meetings, if not more than a few, for us really, and again, us, these will be open sessions, anybody can come, for us to really get grounded with the final concept. So what was initially showed in the meeting a few weeks ago on the overhead in the council meeting, again, was a concept. It was something that was submitted with a grant application to make it look pretty. Here's the overall concept. It is by no means exactly what we're doing. And that's why we're doing this, because we want to make sure the voices are heard. And so to sum that up, we're going to continue doing that. And we have another meeting next Tuesday to, again, just sit. Hopefully some new people will come and share some ideas, and we can have some takeaways and things that maybe we haven't thought about, you haven't thought about. This is how we get to that next step. So these meetings will continue. The next one is next Tuesday night from 6 to 7:30. There's another one the following week. It's actually the 4th of July week, but it's on July 2nd. Again, with the intent that more people come, different people come, same people come too as well, and share ideas and thoughts. I mean, I have a lot of takeaways from tonight, and I think there were some really good ideas, and maybe there were just, some deep wishes too. But, it doesn't hurt to wish in these situations too. It helps us to build for the future. So I appreciate everybody's feedback tonight. And again, the next 2 meetings will be on Tuesday night. And then from there, what I anticipate happening is we would be then giving American Structure Point some time to put our thoughts together. There are going to be some things that they can do. There are going to be some things they cannot do. And then they'll be coming back to us with some options and ideas. And then once again, we'll schedule these meetings once again, open to the public, all public input. Anybody can speak, and we share our ideas and really come together as a group as to what we want this to look like to get to that final project. Yes, Mike,
One quick question. Will American Structure Point attend some of these meetings?
yes, they will.
Okay.
I really felt comfortable with tonight's meeting that we could really just, sit down and have a conversation, and I can answer. And thank goodness for Doug being here tonight, who really spearheaded a lot of these grants for the different communities to help answer some of the questions, have some takeaways, and then these meetings will, kind of define down a little bit further each time. So I'd anticipate probably next week I'll try and get American Structure Point out here. Awesome. Any additional items or any additional feedback? If not, we'll adjourn this meeting, although I don't know that we need an adjournment, but let's just do it just because. So, motion has been made by Mr. Mays. Seconded it by Bink Garbett. All those in favor state so by saying aye. Meeting adjourned. Forgot what I was going to say there.